Hello, I'm Stuart Clayton and welcome to the second lesson in my series on scales. This time we're going to look at minor scales. Now there are three different types of minor scale. We have the natural minor, the harmonic minor and the melodic minor. We're going to look at all three over the course of this lesson. Now it's really important that you've completed the first lesson, which was on major scales, and you've got all that information firmly under your belt, because this really does move on from that and is all based upon you having that kind of knowledge. Okay, so if you've got your major scales together in all 12 keys all over the bass, you're not confined to any kind of patterns or anything like that, then this is the place to be. If not, it might be time for you to go back and just have a refresher course over that first lesson. Okay, so we're going to start off with the natural minor scale. I'm just going to play the A natural minor scale for you so you can hear how it sounds. It's very different to the major scale. Here we go. Okay, now the natural minor scale is once again built up of a series of intervals, and we're once again using tones and semitones, although they'll be in a different order now as opposed to the order that we had in the major scale. So here we go. This is an A minor scale. So we have A to B, we have a tone. B to C, we have a semitone. C to D, we have another tone. D to E, another tone. E to F is a semitone. F to G is a tone. And G to A is another tone. Okay, so that was the A natural minor scale. That series of intervals that we just looked at will always result in a natural minor scale, whether you play it from A or from D or wherever, really. Now, some of you might have noticed that that scale contains all natural notes, and in that way it's identical to the C major scale. And the reason for this is because they are related scales. Every major scale has a relative minor scale, and A minor is the relative minor of C major. Now, the way we can find out the relative minor of any major key is to start from the root note of the major key and count up 6 scale degrees. So if we count up through the key of C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we get to A. That's our relative minor. Now, another way that you can do the same thing is to count downwards 3 scale degrees. Okay, so we start on C, B, A. That's our relative minor scale. And that works in any key. So if we take F major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we get a D, so it's going to be D minor. Similarly, if we walk downwards 3 scale degrees, we get a D there, so D minor again. So that's the way you can go through all the major scales and find out which minor scales are related to it. Now we're going to look a bit deeper at the A natural minor scale now, and we're going to look at the content of the scale and use that knowledge to play it on one string, just on the A string. So as you know, it contains only natural notes, okay, so no sharps or flats. So if you know your major scales as well as you should do, this should be a piece of cake. We're going to play the scale just on the one string. Here we go. Okay, so let's try that from a different A. Let's take the A at the 2nd fret of the G string. Try the same thing. Okay, now you can pick any of the different A's on the bass and apply the same theory, and you'll always get a natural minor scale. Let's adapt that now to play it over 2 octaves. Here we go. Okay, now once again, I didn't stick to any pre-planned patterns or anything like that. I just used my knowledge of the scale, my knowledge of the fretboard in order to get around the scale. Let's try that from a different place. Let's try that from the 5th fret of the E string. Okay, now let's descend a different way. Okay, so in doing so, in ascending one way, descending another, I used a good portion of the fretboard to get around the A natural minor scale. Let's look at the next scale on the circle of fifths now. If you take the next major key on the circle of fifths after C, we get G. And the relative minor scale of the key of G is E minor, E natural minor. So we're going to have the same notes as the key of G, which is all naturals, but we have an F sharp in the mix. So let's use that knowledge to play an E natural minor scale just on the E string. Here we go. Now let's try that over 2 octaves. Okay, so that's the first 2 natural minor scales. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that the next step would be to adapt what we know into that longer exercise that we looked at in the major scales chapter, where we went from the lowest available note within the key. Now, if we did that, we'd be playing the exact same exercise, because if we play A minor from the lowest note on the bass, it's got the same notes in it as the key of C, so you'd end up with the exact same exercise. So the exercise that we talked about in the major scales chapter, not only is it good for warming up, practicing your scales, your fretboard knowledge and your ear, it's actually a good way of practicing your minor scales as well. The key to it is remembering which major scales and which minor scales are related, so that you know that when you're playing the first part, you know that you're playing either in the key of C or the key of A minor. It's just a case of remembering which one is which. Okay, now we're going to look at 3 bass lines that make use of the natural minor scale. And what I'm going to do is just play them through for you first, one at a time, and then we'll stop and have a quick look at the note choices that I've made in the scale, and we'll dissect that a little bit. And you'll find that the music is available on the website for you to download as a PDF. So let's do the first bass groove. This is in the key of A natural minor. Okay, so that was our A natural minor bass groove. Okay, very simple sort of pop funk groove. Just to talk through briefly what I played there, I'm just sticking really to chord tones and scale tones. There's nothing fancy in there. So we started off with a sort of a root and octave figure. Then I used the third of the scale, the C. This is the note that's really important. It's the note that makes it the minor scale. And I just played a sort of descending figure from that kind of thing. The second bar, I used some more scale tones, the E and the F. Okay, you can really obviously see the scale shape there that I used. The third bar was identical to the first one, and in the fourth bar, I went for an upper register fill, where I arpeggiated an A minor 7 chord, and I just filled it out with scale tones. Okay, so you should now take that bass line and learn that in all 12 keys, so you can apply the natural minor scale to all kinds of different situations and fretboard positions. Let's look now at the second bass groove. This one is going to be in the key of E natural minor, so we're going to be using the F sharp as well as all the natural notes. Okay. Okay, so that exercise used the E natural minor scale. And just to briefly explain what was going on there, I used chord tones of root, octave and 7 for the first 4 notes. And then I just walked up from the B, the 5th, using some chord tones, scale tones rather. In the second bar, I added a 16th note fill. Okay, that goes from the F sharp. Again, I'm just using scale tones. The third bar, once again, was identical to the first bar. And in the fourth bar, I went for an upper register fill again, and this focused on the B, the E, and the G, which are all chord tones from the sort of underlying E minor 7 chord. So I went. Okay, so I'm really just focusing on chord tones at this point. Once again, take that line and try and adapt that to all 12 keys. That might be a bit trickier because it was made use of open strings, but that will certainly be a challenge for you. Okay, we're going to look now at the third exercise. This is going to make use of the C natural minor scale. Okay, it's going to be related to the major key of E flat. So we're going to have E flats, B flats and A flats, as well as the natural notes. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that exercise made use of the C natural minor scale. It had more of a disco feel to it. Okay, and what I played in the first bar was literally just some scale tones, C, D, E flat, and then back to C, but I used octaves as well. I carried that on into bar 2, with a C and a B flat. Then once again I went for a 16th note fill, really just walking down through the scale. The third bar was almost identical to the first one, but instead of going back to the C, I went up to the F. And then in the final bar, I arpeggiated a C minor chord with an F in the middle there. That's a scale tone rather than a chord tone. That's the fill that I played at the end, and that's really just focusing on scale tones once again. Okay, so that's another exercise for you to take and play through in all 12 keys. Okay, so that concludes the natural minor scales. As you can see, this really builds on what you've learned in the major scales chapter, and it's important that you allow the knowledge from each lesson to sort of intertwine, because the scales are related. It's really important that you can understand which ones relate to which minor scales. We're going to look now at the harmonic minor scales. These have a very different flavour to the natural minor. I'm just going to play you an A harmonic minor scale so you can hear that sound. Here we go. Now, you can obviously hear how different that is to the natural minor, but it's really just one note that has made that difference. If you know the natural minor scales as well as you should do by now, you'll find that learning the harmonic minors isn't as hard as it could be, because you're only altering the scale by one note. And what we're going to do is, for each natural minor scale, we're going to sharpen the 7th note of the scale. Okay, the 7th note of the scale is known as the leading note, because it leads us back to the octave. So whereas with a natural minor scale, an A natural minor scale, we had a G. For the harmonic minor, we're going to make that a G sharp. That's the note that really gives the scale its character. Okay, so that note gives us a different interval. Previously we've just looked at tones and semitones, but this time we've got an augmented second as well. So let me talk you through the pattern of tones and semitones that we get with this scale. So we have A to B, that's a tone. B to C, a semitone. C to D, a tone. D to E, a tone. E to F is a semitone. And then F to G sharp is our augmented second, okay? And then finally we finish off with a G sharp to the A is a semitone. Now this augmented second will look to many of you like a minor third because it's the same kind of fretboard position, but because it is F to a G of some kind, we refer to it as a second, and it's augmented. Okay, so now let's take the knowledge that we have of the A harmonic minor scale, which is that it is identical to the natural minor, but with a sharpened 7th degree, and we'll just play that on the open A string. Here we go. Okay, now assuming that you know your natural minor scales, it shouldn't be too much of a stretch to adapt this into a 2-octave A harmonic scale. Let's try that now over 2 octaves. We'll start from the open A string once again. Now, as you play through that scale in all the sort of different fretboard positions that you can think of, you'll find that that augmented second between the F and the G sharp really throws up some tricky problems when coming up with sort of fingering patterns. This jump from the F to the G sharp is quite a big one, and it might take you a little while to get used to that. Okay, so once again, you can develop that exercise from the lowest note on the bass, which is available in that key. That is, in this case, going to be E. So now let's play 4 bars ascending through the harmonic minor scale and then 4 bars descending. Okay, so once we've got this together, we should move on to the next scale. The next one is E harmonic minor. So it's going to be identical to the E natural minor, which was just contained the F sharp. But we're going to sharpen the leading note at the 7th degree, which is D. We're going to sharpen that to a D sharp. So we're basically just playing a natural minor scale, sharpening the 7th. Let's try that on one string first. And now over 2 octaves. Okay, so that's the first 2 harmonic minor scales. Now it's up to you now to go and learn the other 10 scales. If you've learnt the natural minor scales, you should find the harmonic minors fall into place fairly easily because you're only altering the scale by 1 note. Okay, we'll move on now to the final minor scale that we're going to look at in this lesson. This is the jazz melodic minor scale. Now, any of you with a background in classical theory will remember that the melodic minor scale was a different ascending and descending. Now, that has very little sort of real-world application. So what we do, or what jazz musicians tend to do, is to play the scale the same way going up and going back. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at now. This is the jazz melodic minor scale. Now, once again, we're going to refer this back to a scale we've already looked at, and we're only going to alter 1 note. But this time what we're going to do is relate it back to the major scale. And if we take a C major scale, and we just flatten the 3rd, which is the note that makes it major, okay, that's the E. If we flatten that to an E flat and play the same scale, we're going to get a C jazz melodic minor scale. Let's try that. Okay, so it's quite an unusual sounding scale. It's almost like a major scale and a minor scale stuck together. Now let's use that knowledge that we've just gained of the scale and play that on one string. We're going to start from the C on the A string. We're going to work our way up one octave, essentially just playing a C major scale, but we're flattening the third to create a jazz melodic minor. Here we go. Okay, let's adapt that to be a 2-octave jazz melodic minor scale. So that's the C jazz melodic minor scale. Now you can learn the remaining 11 jazz melodic minor scales just by taking the major scales that you already know and flattening the thirds. Now this sounds simpler than it actually is, and you'll find that as you play through them they have some tricky sort of fingering issues, and they take a little while for your ear to get used to as well. But basically, by learning the major scales and the natural minors as well as you have, you should find that the harmonic minors and the jazz melodic minors fall into place relatively easily. Now, the harmonic minor and jazz melodic minor really come into their own when you start learning the various modes and arpeggio shapes that come out of them, and that's something that we'll look at in the future. But for now, if you just practice the scales as we've looked at them in this lesson, you should find that your playing begins to develop in leaps and bounds, hopefully. Okay, so I hope that you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next lesson.